Hi everyone, sorry for the very late vlog update. It is now thankfully Thanksgiving break, so I'm in my pajamas and I can finally update my vlog. Yay! Thank you to everyone on Tumblr who responded to my request for suggestions. I decided to I decided to do this vlog post based on the Crossroads Angels suggestion about learning styles. Other suggestions I'll probably get to as soon as I can because they're all so interesting. But this one is particularly relevant. I'm just kind of stuttering right now because I just filmed this whole thing and Windows 8 decided to eat it. I'm not really enjoying Windows 8 right now. So I did get a new laptop, which is why I have Windows 8. And so thankfully the sound quality is a lot better. I don't know about the video quality, but the sound quality is. So welcome to my disgusting, dirty room. I've not been able to clean because all of my time has been spent driving and teaching and driving and staying in hotel rooms because I don't want to drive and grading and responding to emails and trying to not confuse myself with my grading system and keeping track of student work, and it's just exhausting, and there's a lot more to this teacher thing, a lot more responsibility than I kind of thought. But you know what, that's how it goes. So actually, teaching styles is something that I've been thinking a lot about over the last month or so because of this, the teaching gig, right? One of the difficulties in teaching the study of religion is that, with all due respect to feminist pedagogies and sensory kinds of pedagogies that are extremely important, and new pedagogies that highlight the importance of understanding the sensory experience and the body in religious studies, which I'm all for and I'm very invested in, because that's kind of where my work is in the body and understanding the senses in religious experience. Texts are and always will be primary, especially if you do historical studies. Texts are our way into kind of a worldview, into at least they provide most of the data about historical circumstances. Of course, archaeology has a great role to play, but if you're an undergrad freshman taking an introduction to the study of religion or introduction to Christianity, you're not going to be getting really hands-on experience with kind of archaeological methods and theories. So texts are primary, and texts are going to be primary in many different college courses, especially in the humanities. So part of the difficulty is teaching the introduction to Christianity, which is what I teach at one of my schools, and making sure that while senses are important, that students learn how to read and interpret primary texts, because it's kind of setting them up for success in all of the upper division humanities courses that they will have to take. So part of the problem, however, has been that I need to get out of my graduate school mindset, which says that yes, of course everyone's going to read a 40-page text and then show up to argue about it full of love and joy and effort and energy for 4 hours the next day. That's just not, it's just not practical, and it's not something that freshmen are willing to do. And I know that. I mean, I knew that, but part of my hope has been, being a teacher, just showing up and hoping that everyone's done the reading and being able to just argue about the text for 4 hours. Yeah, in my dreams, maybe, and in a graduate setting, maybe, or upper division setting, maybe, but not with freshmen. With freshmen, you need to teach them how to encounter a text. So I've been doing a lot of lecturing, and I've been doing a lot of kind of providing the background to texts, but mostly I've been expecting that they will read the text. When they've expressed their confusion and their difficulty to me with reading the textbook and just saying, it's just a block of text and we don't know what we're looking for, and we don't we don't know what we're looking for and we can't read this, what I've done is I've given them a list of questions that they can have that will assist them in their reading, and that they can ask of the reading and ask of themselves, and say, given this reading that I'm doing, can I seek out the answers to these very fundamental questions that are essential to the understanding of the subject? Whether or not they use those list of questions that I give them, that's up to them. But what I found is that even if I give them the list of questions ahead of time and then they come to class and I ask them, so what are the different sources of authority appealed to in the Council of Trent? Or based on your reading of Martin Luther's Freedom of a Christian, what sources of authority does he choose to use to support his argument, and how do those differ from the sources of authority that we've seen up through the history of Western Christianity thus far? They can't answer. They're not used to thinking about those sorts of questions when they read texts. So any sort of complex reasoning or thinking, critical thinking about texts is that I ask for, right? Complex questions that I might ask, even if they've had the time to think about it and the questions ahead of time, they will not answer. And I'm wondering if it's probably because of a mixture of factors. One of them being it's 7:45 in the morning in one of my classes, and nobody's awake at 7:45. Nobody. I'm not even awake at 7:45. I wake myself up by talking. But they obviously have not learned that trick yet. Also, for many of them, this is their first semester in college. They are intimidated. They don't know what they're doing. Many of them are very bright. They're not in college by mistake. They should be there. But I think that for a lot of students, especially in American schools, doing well in class and behaving in class means not talking in class. And that's exactly the opposite of what it means to do well in class in college. So they're not used to talking. They're not used to responding to direct questions or to even being prepared to that extent. They're used to showing up and having things spoon-fed to them and having teachers deposit things in their brains and then ask for them later. I do not operate by the banking theory of education. I don't think that you learn by being able to regurgitate things that I've said after the fact. I think that you learn by being able to think about the things that you've read and respond to the critical questions that I pose in class. So it's a variety of problems. One way that I gotten around that in one particular day is I had them read the text of a hymn, the Akathistos hymn, and think about the theological issues in that hymn. Meanwhile, they're also reading kind of background chapter information from a textbook, and maybe they're doing too much reading. I don't know. But when they came to class, I had the lights dimmed. I had incense. I asked ahead of time, by the way, so no allergy or asthma attacks were had. Thank you very much. Yes, I'm a considerate teacher. Huh. So I had incense, I had dimmed lights, I had icons projected on the screen. I had written up on the board, if you so choose, you may greet the Theotokos and the Christ child with a kiss or a good morning as you enter the room. I had the Akathistos hymn playing in the background. So I really tried to simulate in the classroom, which is difficult because classes are kind of sterile spaces. I tried to simulate the experience of an Orthodox church. Because I can do that, right? I can do that. It's sensory learning. I'm not setting up a worship space for them. I'm teaching them what it means to experience a worship space in ways that don't involve text, that don't involve a description, that involve actual experience. So that's one of the reasons I also required all my students to attend a worship service, either Christian, Jewish, or Muslim, something they were not familiar with during the semester, and write a paper about that experience, the physical experience of being there. So I'm interested to see what those papers will look like when they come back. I don't think many students have really taken advantage of that opportunity. I think that they're just treating it as something else that they have to do. But, that's one of the reasons I required that assignment, is because they need to actually physically experience what it's like in a particular context to do this thing that we're calling worship. And to see why it's different depending on where you come from. and what context you're in, and then what your theology is or what your philosophy is, and how that changes the sensory experience, or even how the sensory experience changes the philosophy and the theology, right? The two are connected. So I hope that that is a worthwhile assignment. Another way that I tried to switch up this lecture-based or text-based, conversation-based kind of learning experience was I kind of had them role play, where I had them split into two groups, and they did use text. I mean, they had to argue based on text, but they had to argue for their legitimacy as a group calling itself Christian, you know, this claim to the title, this claim to orthodoxy, based on the authority of, or the arguments of a particular text. So one group sort of role-played 16th century German reformers, and they worked with Martin Luther's Freedom of Christian. And then another group role-played 16th century Catholic inquisitors, and their texts that they used to justify their defense of their orthodoxy and justify their assault on the orthodoxy, so-called orthodoxy of these reformers, was the Proceedings of the Council of Trent. They had to read both of these texts for homework, but then what they really had to do was find out how these texts can be used to support one particular identity, Christian identity, over another, and how these texts are used as a source of authority, and to do that without just reading about some scholar's interpretation of how that was done, but by doing it themselves. So I think that experience really helped, because they were able to engage the consequences of the text, or understand the true relevance of the text in ways that didn't involve just reading, that it involved actual arguments. I've done other sorts of small group work like that, where they have to sit and think and maybe argue with each other and kind of take on do some perspective taking. Perspective taking is generally what it's called, usually in ethical and feminist circles, perspective taking. Do some of that. My hope is for next semester to incorporate more of that into my teaching style. Part of the anxieties that have come up because of all of this, and part of that comes from being an INTP, is the sense that there's something I want to achieve, there's something that I want to accomplish. I have all of this range of different ideas and expectations of myself, and I'm really very invested in this whole subject area and this way of thinking and this scholarship, and then knowing that kind of I've screwed it up, right? That I've done some things that didn't work, and feeling an enormous sense of responsibility. Also feeling like in some way I've screwed up these students. I've screwed up their experience and their introduction to the study of religion, the study of Christianity, and now they're going to go off and they're not going to be prepared, or I've done something wrong, or, you know, anyway. So it's a huge sense of responsibility to me. That and I've kind of fallen into the trap of, well, I'm never going to get it right anyway, so I might as well just not try, right? I'm never going to fulfill my own expectations, so why not just kind of do all of this work half-assed and kind of show up and do, you know, the bare minimum and kind of wing it, because I know I can. That's the benefit of a strong extroverted intuition, is you can wing a lot of things. You can wing a lot of conversations. You can just kind of go via your intuition and your superior knowledge of the subject matter, and use that to guide you and arrive at some teachable moments, hopefully, based on a sense of reasonable expectation of what might occur. But really, when you're relying on students to provide that other half of the conversation, a lot can go wrong. So there's a difficulty of, do I want to just rely on my students to bring the other half of the game and show up, and then let my intuition kind of guide me through, and so I can just kind of half-ass all of this? Or do I want to be in complete and utter control of everything that happens, and to be very, very planned about it? To me, the first one is more comfortable. It doesn't require as much work from me. It also results in some unfortunate circumstances or has some unfortunate results because they're unpredictable, and sometimes it doesn't always result in, very teachable moments. But it's also, hey, it is a pedagogy, right? It is kind of a free form sort of let's work with the understanding of the students who are here and put some responsibility on them to be students and to show up and converse. I don't know. It feels lazy to me, though. It feels like I'm not in full control and I'm just kind of relying on my superior understanding of the topic to get me through and sort of kind of teach them some interesting things rather than really be intentional about my pedagogy. So, again, it's a source of anxiety. It's a source of self-loathing sometimes. It can be very difficult. And also, while all of this is, again, fodder for my learning experience and then doing a better job next time, I still feel like I've screwed up my students now. And there's no reversing that. So I think the answer is to be much, much more intentional about it. If you who are viewing, any of you viewers, use the participle there, the viewing ones, have any kind of experience in these matters or have any learning styles that particularly work for you, whether they're more sensory or more hands-on or something like that, especially in the humanities, let me know. Drop me a comment. Send me a video response. If you're an INTP and you have a particular way of learning or teaching that works for you, I'd like to know about it. Also, other Myers-Briggs types, not every Myers-Briggs types is necessarily correlated with particular learning style, but I think that we gravitate towards certain ways of thinking, obviously, since, that's partially how we are distinctive from each other. And so maybe that lends us or points us towards different ways of learning and processing information, and then sharing it. So I'd like to learn more about that. Certainly it's something that I need to be paying attention to. Teaching is something that I want to keep doing. That's the whole point to me of getting a PhD. That's what I'm planning to do. That's my planned vocation. And if I can't get over this emotional block or this emotional sticking point of feeling this intense responsibility for my students when they don't get it, and also this frustration with them that they're not kind of meeting me halfway, and just the emotional sort of drain of constantly feeling like I've done something wrong, constantly feeling like any confusion on the part of the students is my fault, while also feeling like, oh, well, wouldn't they just get this if they just, use their logical, critical thinking skills, and why do I always have to do everything? Both frustrations are in my head constantly of my students don't try hard enough, they don't think, they don't know how to reason, they don't use common sense, they don't know how to invest, they don't know how to use the internet even to find the things that they're looking for, while also, well, they wouldn't be so confused if I had just not screwed everything up to begin with, right? If I had set things up, that if I had anticipated their every confusion, they wouldn't be confused, and now I'm just creating more work for myself. So there's that quote that sometimes floats around of INTPs simultaneously feel superior and inferior to everyone at all times, and that's kind of what's going on here. So if you, INTPs are generally people who like to learn and like to experience new information. We're not all very typical or conventional learners, certainly. So if you have some ways that you typically like to learn, that you can share, or ways that you like to teach, if you happen to be a teacher, please share them with me. I'd like to learn more about this as I go forward. Another difficulty has been conferring with my colleagues about these issues, but having the added awkwardness of them being my colleagues, but significantly more experienced and more well put together colleagues, and the fact that they are my mentors and were my mentors when I was a student. So it's all very, I don't know what the social relationship is here. So that's been a difficulty, but yeah, I never know how to end these things. I never know how to end them. Very awkward. Generally, I end conversations by kind of like disengaging eye contact and walking off awkwardly. Sometimes it works. Sometimes people take the cue of like conversation over. But yeah, I think I'll just press the stop button. That generally works. So drop me a line. I hope that answered the question. I feel like I did a better job of answering the question the first time I filmed this, but you know, that's lost in the ether or the interwebs or whatever, wherever it's lost. Lost in the matrix. Alright. Thanks for watching, and sorry this was so long.